Welcome to a conversation with a community leader. I'm Cary, Bozeman, your host. This program is sponsored by Bremerton-Kitsap, and my guest today is certainly a community leader and been on the Poulsbo City Council for, Ed, how long?
25 years.
25 years. That's a community leader, Ed.
Thank you.
And my guest is Ed Stern, an old friend of mine, by the way, and a member of the Poulsbo City Council for 25 years.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, Ed, before we get into, government work, what brought, are you from this area, or what brought you here, and what did you do for a living that brought you here?
I moved here directly from Montana.
Were you
a little
born
city
in Montana?
Nope. I grew up in the Bay Area. I'm a proud graduate of the University of California at Berkeley. Go Bears!
Not a very
good
football team, though.
Well, get me going. But by the time I got my degree, California, I needed to decompress. So I took my degree, went to Montana, preschool, emotionally
You were
disturbed.
born in the San Francisco area?
Yep. And was doing schoolwork. I was a preschool teacher. And in those days, a lot of the special education was all federally funded. It wasn't local levy. So I was writing grants, and that came to the attention of the city of Livingston, Montana, and they needed a grant writer. You remember the heyday of UDAG grants and CDBG?
CEDA?
Yep, that was the Jimmy Carter era. A lot of federal support for local government. Yep. So I started writing grants for the city, switched over there, and then they didn't know what to do with the grants, so they made me a community development director, and off I ran. So I moved to Kitsap County in 1986, having given up that career for another.
What brought you here?
At that time, a brokerage firm out of St. Louis was expanding, and they needed a West Coast presence. They had one in Seattle, and they wanted to broach to the peninsulas, plural. So I kind of pioneered the way for them, and I chose Poulsbo. They thought I was crazy. And I said, no.
Rather than Seattle or something like that?
Or Silverdale.
Or Silverdale.
And I said, no, because all the money is in homes and cars and all, and if I'm going to do investments, I want to see a lot of homes with moss on the roof, because those are the savers.
So most of your career, because the city council job's not a full-time job. You can't make a living off that.
That's correct.
So most of your career, you were a stockbroker?
Right. Stocks and bonds, retirement planning, college planning, managed a couple of offices. Over those 35 years, I worked for 3 different brokerage companies.
And are you retired?
I retired in 2019. My wife says I'm not, because I'm still on the city council, any number of regional and state boards, and she thinks I'm crazy, Cary.
Well, we're all a little crazy to get into this business. So what drew you, Ed? You moved out here, you were a stockbroker. What drew you into elected office? Why did you want to do that?
So as a community development director in Montana, the then planner for the city of Poulsbo found out that I had headed up a Main Street project, one of the first in the country. And they were just getting ready to rip up beautiful Front Street and wanted some help in planning. And so I assisted them with what we had done in Livingston. He goes, you need to be on the planning board. And that was during the era of Mitch Mitchison, who held the mayorship for quite a while. Yeah. And then I was on the planning board. And,
you were on the planning commission, huh?
And my normal, shy, receding personality, he decided I didn't really need to be on the planning board. And so that set the bit for me getting on city council.
Yeah. Well, I remember I was drawn to it. I was working for the Boys and Girls Club of America in Bellevue. And I'd go down to the city council meetings and complain, or not complain, but just suggest that we didn't have enough parkland, right? And enough play fields for kids. And the council was pretty conservative in those days in Bellevue. This is back in the 70s. And they weren't paying any attention to me. And they just didn't get it. So I thought, well, someone said, Bozeman, why don't you just run for the city council? Then you can get all your parks you want,
Yeah. So
I ran for the city council against the current mayor. It's a council manager form of government, but he was the mayor. And every parent in town knew me, because I was the director of the Boys and Girls Club, for God's sake. And I got elected, and it just changed my life. I just fell in love with local government. I'm not a big policy walk, I like providing parks, services, making the city. I love local government. I'd never see myself like being a congressman and, that working on all that public policy stuff. I want projects.
Yeah.
And so then I like you, not as long as you have, but I ran 4 terms and got elected. And that a council member in that town serves as the mayor.
Right.
If you get elected, it's a pretty competitive race between 7 people. And I got elected 3 times mayor and just fell in love with it.
Cary, let me right now, on behalf of all the electeds in the county and city, thank you for your many years of public service, leadership for downtown Bremerton when it was languishing, and being a figurehead for the county for a while on the Seattle stage. Well, thank you.
That's very kind of you, Ed. I don't know how many people have been mayors of 2 cities in this state. I've never looked that up, but I don't think that many. But it was a blessing for me.
I'll let my wife know there's 2 of us that need therapy, not just myself.
Let's talk about Poulsbo. You've got an active mayor there. She seems obviously doing a great job, and you got a lot going on. So what are some of the projects? What are the challenges in Poulsbo?
The way I characterize it, and this never changes, when I moved there from Montana, as we already discussed, the population was about 4,000, maybe just under. It's triple that
4,
now.
4,000, yeah.
Yep, it's triple that now.
That's a small city. It was a small city.
And the refrain I've heard is, you're going to ruin this charming city. I've read your articles. You described Poulsbo as charming in West Sound magazine.
Right.
And I've heard that all along. And I keep my ear to the rail. The underlying objective, I'm sure for the mayor and the council as well, is to keep Poulsbo and managing the growth, not to spoil it. So what I listen to is the conjugation of the verb, you're going to ruin Poulsbo, as opposed to Poulsbo's ruined. And here we've tripled in population with even more growth and development on the way, and more people have moved in, and they love it. They just don't want us to ruin it in the future. So somehow we're doing something right.
Yeah, well, it's quality of life.
Yep.
And if we're going to grow in Kitsap County in the next 25 years, that's obvious for a variety of reasons. Housing costs are lower over here than in King County. People can work out of their homes, so they don't have to take the ferry every day. So we've been a slow growth community because we've been a military community, and most of our industry is through the military, right?
Right.
I mean, by and large. And that's been about 1% a year. And 1% a year, you can keep up with the infrastructure. Just almost not that hard. But when you go to 2%, which I think we're close to now, you double your population in 30 years. And
that's right.
And right now we have 250,000 people. Just think when we have 500,000 people. That's going to be the big challenge, Ed, is how do we maintain quality of life for the people that love it here? Absolutely. And moved here for that, right?
I know you well understand the problem because you are in the Bremerton hot seat.
I do. And I think we need a long-term regional plan here, not just one for each city, and not just the county, but the cities and the county coming together and saying, okay, what are going to be the challenges to be able to maintain this quality of life for the next 30 years? What are the projects that are most important? And I led an effort like that in King County called King County 2000. That's how long ago it was. And we met and we all came up with a regional plan that we were going to fund that included light rail back in those days. And at the last minute, we all had to sign on, all the cities that were there. The city of Seattle decided that they just weren't going to participate in the funding package. They didn't want to give up their taxing authority for a regional program. And here, 15, 20 years later, they pay 5 times what we would have paid had we gone ahead with a light rail system back then.
Yep.
5 times.
Yep.
So this is going to be a big challenge. It's going to be fun and exciting. But, you take little things like Harris, the hospital having backups now in the emergency room, right? I mean, you can't get people. That's just an indication of the growth and not having the infrastructure to, provide services for it.
That's correct.
So yeah, it's going to be. I want to talk a little bit of some of the challenges that I see, Ed, and housing is a big one, and homelessness. What are you guys doing in Poulsbo to talk about providing, especially low-income housing, and dealing with the homeless population? Maybe you don't have a problem in that area.
No, we all do.
Yeah,
we all do. Some more than others. The housing equation is really interesting because it touches back on growth, obviously, by definition. But, when people want to maintain what they have. They need to understand, we often look to Bainbridge Island as an example of intended or unintended gentrification, where it becomes stratified for middle and even higher income to be able to afford it. So we're approaching the problem in the way that we want to maintain our diverse populations, and we do have one. We have the fastest growing Latino population in the county.
Interesting.
And others. If we were to somehow have the authority, the ability, the power to close the gates and just maintain what we've got, people need to understand that that would backfire on causing housing prices, supply and demand, to shoot up. And either they'd be priced out or the whole town would become gentrified. Again, higher income could only afford to live there. So we want to approach it with maintaining the diverse populations we have. One of the initiatives we're pursuing on council right now is protecting our mobile home parks.
Oh, yeah.
Which we have a number of them. Close to between 5 and 10% of our housing is mobile home, legacy.
Wow.
And the land under those, people own the mobile home, but they don't own the land. As housing prices increase, the idea of stripping that and redeveloping it for housing could be a better return on investment for the owner. What happens to all those folks? So we're looking at a number of initiatives, codes, regulations that would enhance and protect those mobile homes. That's just one example, and those tend to be the lower income or those who are challenged, certainly.
It's kind of, 7, 8 years ago, you could rent an apartment in Kitsap County for $800 a month, a one-bedroom apartment, right? And that fit for people who are making hourly wage, maybe working at the grocery store, whatever they're doing, important jobs, and they're getting paid $22 an hour or something like that. Maybe not even that. Those people can't afford an apartment anymore. Those $800 apartments are $1,800 apartments now, right?
That's correct.
And my daughter works in King County in affordable housing. She co-manages affordable housing complex, and she said, "Dad, people are just waiting in line to get in here.
Oh.
They beg us when we have an opening. They're lined up to get there." So
it's tough. It's tough, and it's not just Kitsap County. It's Seattle. To a degree, it's nationwide. You mentioned the Navy before. A lot of people I know in Poulsbo have talked about being priced out because the Navy comes in with its families and sets a bottom line on rental allowance, which I think is about $1,700. It's probably gone up. And they feel like that's pressuring local populations from being able to afford, but it far exceeds the Navy now. It is supply and demand, limited housing, population, and it's nationwide, Cary.
As far as Kitsap County goes, it's not just Poulsbo or Bremerton. It's really a regional issue, this housing issue, right?
Yep.
And my sense is you need a regional plan here about where the housing's going to go. Otherwise, it's just going to sprawl out and just keep pushing out. Developers, God love them, but, they got to find affordable land or they can't make the thing work, right? So that's just sprawl. And I think we have to do everything we can to come up with a plan that maintain some of our public spaces, creates more parks and all these kind of things that need to support this urbanization of these small communities like Poulsbo and Bainbridge and all that. Boy, if we don't have a plan for that, it's not going to end up pretty. It is not.
The state, back in the early 90s, when Maria Cantwell was still in the State House before she went on to the United States Senate, helped author the Growth Management Act, which defines largely the relationship between the county and cities and the apportionment of land and housing and population, sewer and water between them. And the idea there was to try and limit sprawl. The irony of Kitsap and the cities, we're the inverse of every other of the 38 counties in the state. The majority of the population reside in the county.
I know.
And not in the cities.
Well, that speaks to should Silverdale be a city?
Thank you,
right?
sir.
If they were a city, which they should be, in my opinion, they'd be the biggest next to Bremerton. They'd, what, about 25, 30,000? And otherwise, and there's no height in Silverdale. Why isn't there a 10 or 15-story apartment downtown? All that kind of stuff. So I hope in the future the county and the cities can talk about the future of Silverdale, because that's a big opportunity for growth right there. But it can't all be one-story, big shopping malls with big parking lots and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
We got to look at this different, Ed. Back to Poulsbo, because I'm a port commissioner myself. I'm interested in the waterfront. You have a great waterfront opportunity. It's a little aging. It's been down there a long time, but you've got a port. What's the relationship between the port and the city, and how does that work? And does the marina have liveaboards?
Yes, they do.
Do they? Okay.
In fact, funny you bring that up. We didn't coordinate on your questions at all. We're having a summit with the port commissioners at the end of this month. They're right now replacing that aging seawall, which was timbered creosote going back 50, 60 years to a floating. And so we assisted them with permitting and some of the avenues on getting that done. If you go look at downtown waterfront right now, you see a large crane out on the water.
Oh, good.
That is replacing.
So they got it funded?
Yeah, it's happening. Fully funded and underway, Cary.
That's
so
great. That was
a lot of restoration work going on, I'm proud to say.
Yeah, that's great. I have to ask you this, Ed. The city of Poulsbo got a theme to it, Norwegian, right? Just kind of like Leavenworth, right? How does that work? Are you happy? I mean, you've been that way. I guess we were settled. Poulsbo was settled by Norwegian people, right? And tribal people, right?
In fact, if I can follow up on that, the Finn Hill exit to Poulsbo is not an accident. The Finns lived across the bay. They weren't welcome, per se, dating back to old Europe and relationships there. So you had the Norwegians largely in the old core. You had the Finns on that stretch that's now defined by Finn Hill up to Highway 3.
Right.
The Swedes were in Lamolo and had little to do with each other.
Well, that works good for the downtown, doesn't it? Because you get a lot of tourists, you get a lot of that kind of thing. So,
20 years ago, the council debated that. Leavenworth was an example. We were doing our comprehensive plan, visioning. You know the process well, Cary. And the bottom line was we decided firmly that Poulsbo was a city that had tourism, but it was not a tourist town, would not become a tourist town. We were not interested in fabricating a Norwegian environment, creating a Disney-like approach or thematic approach. We wanted not to be a bedroom community. We want to be a thriving economy moving forward that values its heritage. And so that was a very concrete decision process.
Interesting. So the future will remain as part of the culture of Poulsbo.
It's our corporate branding.
It's your corporate
Viking
branding.
City, Little Norway, call it what you will, but it doesn't define us. It is just a branding, just like you at the city of Bremerton went through a branding process during your term as mayors.
Yeah. Speaking of all that, history and all that, a couple of years ago, the city of Poulsbo and the local tribes had some differences, and I know you've been working with the tribes, and how's that all going?
So I've been a longtime city liaison to the Suquamish tribe. A lot of ironies there. And the one that's historically hard to believe, we were the first city in the state to adopt a formal working relationship, memorandum of understanding with a tribe in the state's history as late as 2005.
Wow.
And we're proud to own that. It was written about statewide in a couple magazines. We'd meet periodically. It was a formal, ongoing relationship, culminating episodically, because we're going to be moving forward. Ironically, the 2019 fireworks in Poulsbo resulted in the very tragic shooting of Stonechild Chief Stick, not a registered member, but his family was of the Suquamish tribe. He was Rocky Boy Cree out of Montana. I know it well, but was shot and killed tragically in a police-involved incident right before the fireworks in a very dense crowd. And that created all kinds of repercussions. It also, the zeitgeist of the time was with us with the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and it all rolled up and caused a lot of shock and sadness and regret, but also soul searching on the part of certainly Poulsbo as a community, but all of us in the North End and beyond. I'm proud to say that we have come together as of June. We've reinstated formal relationships. The tribe suspended it in early 2020 with the tension, with the uncertainties. The city's taken a lot of concrete steps, not only to deal with the shooting itself and behavior around it, but how we approach populations, not just BIPOC populations, brown, indigenous, people of color, but also those with mental health, drug addiction, alcoholism.
So you took an unfortunate accident and you've made something good out of it. I mean, you've tried to improve from where you were.
Absolutely. I think without that incident, if there's a silver lining, I think Poulsbo would have resisted seeing itself as a community that needed to question its racial standards, where we were as a community, as individuals, school district, businesses. That required us to step up to the plate and look at ourselves on all kinds of levels that I don't think would have quite unfolded the way they have.
I think I've been observing it, and because I'm interested in these kinds of things. And I'm really proud of the city of Poulsbo. I think you guys have done all the right things.
And I'm proud of the Suquamish Tribal Council and the community and our coming together.
Yeah. How has COVID, I always have to ask this question in the last couple of years, how's COVID affected the city? Are you back in the office? Are you doing your council meetings still remotely?
So as of about 3 months ago, we moved back into the council chambers. We invested a lot
in... You give people the option of being there?
Yes, we're going to be moving permanently forward on a hybrid level.
Yeah.
And so people will be able to be in person. They'll be able to watch it through TV and BCAT, live streaming. And we have the large projection screens so that people can actually come into the chambers and see us. So that's a benefit, certainly, of the COVID. It goes back to that early broadband work, you'll remember, over 20 years ago.
Which you led.
That, we are separate from Seattle, but connected. And the important connection besides the ferry was that broadband, because everything was moving online. Schooling, medicine, telework. And I think the blessing of the COVID is it's advanced us as we projected we would get to someday in a much more speedy manner.
Yeah. Hey, back to the, I was going to ask you this question, back to the waterfront.
Sure.
Is it Poulsbo's plan to maybe have a passenger-only ferry coming in and out of there in the future? Or would you like that?
We looked at that about 20 years ago with Port Madison Enterprises, the business arm of the Suquamish tribe. You remember Russell Steele?
Oh, yeah.
And the tribe was looking at maybe the idea of even being able to do ferries into the casino area. Yep. They built the long pier. That's a possibility in the future. I think Poulsbo might welcome that. We had Argosy cruises coming in at Christmas. You'll remember that. And now we have American Cruise Lines during the cruise season coming into Poulsbo, and now Bremerton, Port Townsend. The idea of regular ferry service would be an economic equation, largely. I think that'll be resolved in the future.
Well, for Bremerton, it's worked out great because we've only got one boat. Washington State Ferries are only on one boat, and they've been on one boat for about, gosh, I don't know how long. The state ferry system really has some big challenges right now.
Yes, it does.
Ed, I never have enough time on this program. Is there anything I have not asked you you'd like to share with the audience?
One of the things we're working on, not just for Poulsbo and not just for Kitsap County, but the 5 western counties, is the physical presence of a state university located physically here, offering 4-year degrees in concert with Olympic College, in concert with Peninsula Community Colleges. And right now, the 5 western counties, are the largest population with no baccalaureate direct opportunity.
Yeah, and that's got to change.
I think we can solve that. We've been having many conversations, and right now we're working hard at Bellingham and Western Washington University with the legislature to see if there's an opportunity.
Who's leading this effort?
Olympic College, the city of Poulsbo, Kitsap Economic Development Alliance, Western Washington University. I think we're all in this together. You know, the one benefit of Kitsap, you'll remember this, Cary, unlike our neighbors to the Seattle side, we all have to pull in the same direction because we're in a small boat.
Well, if this, I'm a big education person, so if the port can participate and be of any help,
Thank you.
we can throw a few bucks at things once in a while if they're really important. So that's great. I'm sure you've had. Are you still involved with? I know you were president of the Washington State Cities Association.
Correct.
Are you still involved with that?
I just came off the board of directors as past president. My term overlapped with the infrastructure effort, which came to fruition in the Biden administration.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many shoes I wore out marching between Senate and House office buildings in an uncoordinated schedule. There's quite a distance between
Well, that's
the
a
two.
big job. Who's the director of that now?
So Peter King retired just last year, and
When I was in office, it was always another fellow.
Stan Finkelstein.
That's him. Stan.
A real icon, second only to Ralph Monroe in my book.
That's right. Stan Finkelstein. He was really a good guy.
So Deanna Dawson, who had been executive director of Sound Cities Association, you remember them from the Bellevue days.
Yeah.
We selected her, and she just took over the helm about 2 months ago.
Well, Ed, it's been a pleasure. We're out of time.
Thank you, Cary.
But you're obviously a great example of a community leader. You have been in 25 years, and you're still enjoying it and still doing it.
Thank you, Cary.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Okay, that's another conversation with a real community leader, no doubt about that. And we'll see you next time on a conversation with another community leader.